You said my mind is a storm. I don't think most people would want to be me. They may think they want to be me, but they don't know. They don't understand. But is your storm a happy storm?
No.
It's not a happy storm.
No.
I want to talk about that. What do you think that is?
We should really need like a psychiatrist couch here or something. I think to some degree I was born this way, and then it was amplified by a difficult childhood, frankly. But I can remember even in happy moments when I was a kid that it just feels like there's just a rage of forces in my mind constantly. Now this, productively manifests itself in technology and building things for the most part. So, and I think on balance, the output has been very productive. I think the results, as we discussed earlier with SpaceX, Tesla, PayPal, which is still going today. The first internet company that I started, in fact, the first internet company I started, Zip2, was funded by a New York Times company, Hearst Knight Ridder, and in fact, we wrote some of the software for the New York Times website, and we helped bring online several hundred newspapers that previously were only in print. Now this is in the 90s, which at this point is like, I'm like a grandpa, basically. The 90s and internet feels like a Precambrian era when there were only sponges. Anyway, I feel like a lot of productive things have been done, and you can also look at Tesla as being sort of many companies in one. Like our supercharging network is, if the Tesla supercharging network were its own company, it would be a Fortune 500 company by itself. Just the supercharging system. We also make the cells. We build the power electronics and the powertrain from scratch. We have the most innovative structural design, the largest castings ever used. We have the best manufacturing technology at Tesla, better manufacturing technology than companies that have been doing it for 100 years. So these demons of the mind, are, for the most part, harnessed to productive ends.
Okay, so let me ask you a question
about that. But that doesn't mean that once in a while they, go wrong.
And this is a question I think a lot of people, are always trying to figure out about not just you, but sometimes themselves. Meaning, what is driving all of this? You're doing all of these things. Do you think that you would be as successful, whatever success is, if it wasn't being driven by I think that there's something you're trying to prove, either to yourself or to somebody. I don't know. We're all trying to prove something. Maybe I'm trying to prove it to my mother. I don't know.
No. If I were to describe my philosophy, it is a philosophy of curiosity. I did have this existential crisis when I was around 12 about what's the meaning of life? Isn't it all pointless? Why not just commit suicide? Why exist? I read the religious texts. I read the philosophy books especially the German philosophy books, made me quite depressed, frankly. One should not read Schopenhauer and Nietzsche as a teenager. But then I read Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is a book on philosophy in the form of humor. And the point that Adams was making there was that we don't actually know what questions to ask. That's why he said that, the answer is 42. Like, basically, Earth's a giant computer, and and it came up with the answer 42. But then to actually figure out what the question is, that's the actual hard part. And I think this is generally true also in physics. At the point at which you can properly frame the question, the answer is actually the easy part. So my motivation then was that, well, my life is finite, really a flash in the pan on a galactic time scale. But if we can expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we are better able to figure out what questions to ask about the answer that is the universe. And maybe we can find out the meaning of life, or even what the right question to ask is. Where did we come from? Where are we going? Where are the aliens? Are there aliens? And, these questions, and is there new physics to discover? Or is this, because there seems to be some real questions around dark matter and dark energy. And so the purpose of SpaceX is to extend life beyond Earth on a sustained basis, so that we can at least pass one of the Fermi great filters, which is that of being a single planet civilization. If we are a single planet civilization, then we are simply waiting around for some extinction event, whether that is man-made or natural. But if you're a single planet civilization, eventually you will, something will happen to that planet and you will die. If you're a multi-planet civilization, you will live much longer. Also, a multi-planet civilization that's the natural stepping stone to being a multi-stellar civilization and being out there among the stars. So now this, I think, has two, this is not simply a defensive motivation, but it is also one where that gives meaning, man's search for meaning.
Can I ask you a different...
But let me finish this philosophy point, even though it may seem rather esoteric. It may resonate with a few people. We must get past this Fermi filter of being this great filter of being a single planet civilization. And if we do that, we're more likely to understand the nature of the universe and what questions to ask. If you're a believer in the philosophy of curiosity, then I think you should support this ambition. But it's more, being a multi-planet species is more than simply life insurance for life collectively. That's a defensive reason. But I think also that life has to be more than simply solving one sad problem after another. There have to be reasons where you wake up in the morning and you're happy to be alive. There have to be reasons that you have to say, why are you excited about the future? Like, what gives you hope? And if you aren't sure, ask your kids. And I think the idea of us being a spacefaring civilization and being out there among the stars is incredibly inspiring and exciting and something to look forward to. And there need to be such things in the world.
Let me ask you a different question about confidence. We were having a conversation here earlier about people and where people get their confidence from. Some people have great insecurity. Other people have great confidence. And I was thinking about you because you have a very interesting history where people have told you over and over again that you're wrong.
Well, sometimes they're right.
Well, sometimes they are, but I would say that when it comes to Tesla, when it came to SpaceX, people told you that you were crazy, you were out of your mind, this was never going to happen, this was never going to work. And so what the reason I ask you this, though, is now when people say you're wrong, this isn't right, do you look at that and say, you know what, that's like a red flag for me because, I've been told so often that I'm wrong that I know that I know I'm right because I've had that experience. Or are there people in your life when they say, you know what, Elon, this is not right? Do you know what I'm saying?
I mean, I think what you're sort of trying to say is that, do I at this point think because I've been right so many times when others have said I'm wrong, that now I perhaps believe I'm right when in fact I'm wrong?
You did very well. What do you think?
No, I'm right. Yeah, no, look, here's the thing. Physics is unforgiving. Physics is unforgiving. So, I mean, I have, these various little sayings that I've come up with, that physics is the law and everything else is a recommendation.
Right.
In the sense that you can break any law made by humans, but try breaking a law made by physics. That's much more difficult. So if you are wrong and persist in being wrong, the rockets will blow up and the cars will fail. Right. So this is, we're not trying to figure out what flavor of ice cream is the best flavor of ice cream.
Right.
Like, if there's 1,000 things that can happen on a rocket flight, and only one of them gets the rocket to orbit. And so being wrong results in failure when dealing with physical objects.
But that's the interesting part. So now you've built these great companies that physically, the physics of them are enormously successful. So successful, arguably, that you have leverage over everybody else, right? Nobody else can do Starlink. Nobody else can get nobody else can get the rockets in space yet. Amazon and Jeff Bezos are trying, but they haven't yet.
I hope he does.
You hope he does?
Yeah. I mean, I think, but I actually agree with a lot of Jeff's motivations. I mean, I think, he's, and so let me put it this way. If there was a button I could press that would delete Blue Origin, I wouldn't press it. So I think it's good that he's spending money on making rockets too. I suggest perhaps he spend more time on it, but it's up to him. But I should make a point here. So nothing any of my companies have done has been to stifle competition. In fact, we've done the opposite. So at Tesla, we have open sourced our patents. Anyone can use our patents for free. How many companies do you know who've done that? Can you name one? I can't. At SpaceX, we don't use patents. So, I mean, so once in a while, we'll file a patent just so some patent troll doesn't cause trouble. But we're not stopping any. We've done nothing anti-competitive. We've done nothing to stop our competitors.
I'm not suggesting you are at all.
No, I just want to clarify for the audience, because some companies have done anti-competitive things. I think the strange thing, or the unusual thing about SpaceX and Tesla is that we've done things that have helped our competition. So at Tesla, we have made our supercharger system open access. We've made our charger technology available for free to the other manufacturers.
The reason
No walled garden. We could have put a wall up, but instead we invited them in.
The reason I mention this, though, is because you've had this success in the physics world, you now have these very difficult decisions that have huge impacts on the world that are not physical decisions at all. They're decisions of the mind. They're decisions that you and others have to make, and there's a question whether you should be making these decisions at all. And I think about it in the context of Starlink. Obviously, there was the report about how it's being used in Ukraine and the Russia war. There's questions about Taiwan, whether Taiwan should use it or will use it. I believe they're not right now because they're worried that at some point maybe the Chinese will tell you that you have to, they have leverage over you and you're going to have to turn that off, right? I mean, these are very difficult decisions, and I'm so curious how you think about that. And not just the decisions, the fact that you have that power.
I think it's important for the audience to understand that the reason I have these powers is not because of some anti-competitive actions, it's simply because we've executed very well.
Oh, I'm not dismissing that. I think there are so many people, by the way, who are huge supporters of what you've created.
There are other satellites out there,
But they're not as good as yours. And
Correct.
and we can say that maybe make the same argument out of cars and everything else.
Yes.
But as a result, that gives you enormous leverage. Right?
Okay.
I mean, with the exception of by the way, these advertisers who aren't on X, in every other instance, everybody needs you.
Well, I mean, they use our product if it's better, then use somebody else's product if the other product's better.
And I accept that. And maybe one day somebody else will create a better product.
Is it like, how is it a bad thing to make better products than other companies?
Well, and I want to just go back to the Starlink piece of it, though, because that has sort of a geopolitical ramification in terms of your power and how you think about that specific power, and then the power that the U.S. government might have either over you or not over you, the power the Chinese government might have over you or not over you, and how those things get used.
I mean, what are you suggesting?
I'm asking the question around this very idea of how these satellites are going to be used, whether you think that you should have control of them, whether the government should have control of them.
Do you trust the government?
Well, there's a lot of people who don't trust the government.
Exactly.
But then this goes back to the trust of you, right?
I mean, like I said, we're not the only company who has communication satellites. Our satellites are just much better than theirs. So it's not like we have a monopoly.
Right.
Do you
feel like anybody
has product? It's not like.
Do you feel anybody has leverage over you?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, if we make bad products that people don't want to use, then the users will vote with their resources and use something else.
Let me pivot the conversation for a second.
I mean, certainly, my company's overseen by regulators, and while since SpaceX, Starlink, Tesla are overseen by cumulatively over 100 regulators, in actually more than that, a few hundred regulators, because we're in 55 countries. If you sum up all the times that I had an argument with regulators, of hundreds of regulators over decades, it can sound really terrible, except they forgot to mention that there were 10 million regulations we complied with and only 5 that I disagreed with. But they list all the 5, and it sounds like, wow, this guy's a real maverick. I'm like, yeah, but what about the 10 million we complied with?
Let me one related thing on this, in the leverage of countries and things over you and regulators. X is this free speech platform. You do business in China, lots of business in China. That's an important part of your business, I imagine.
Well, not SpaceX.
How do you think about the leverage that the Chinese have over you? And do they have leverage over you? And how do you feel about, some people would say, is it hypocritical for you to be doing business in China, or frankly in other countries as it relates to X and other things that don't follow this free speech path that you have espoused?
The best that the X platform can do is adhere to the laws of any given country. Do you think there's something more we could do than that?
I think it would be very hard, but I just wonder, given the sort of strong philosophical approach that you've been vocal about, whether you say to yourself, maybe I shouldn't be doing business in that country.
Well, first of all, Starlink and SpaceX are no business in China whatsoever. Tesla has one of 4 vehicle factories in China, and China is, I don't know, a quarter of our market or something like that. And so it's a quarter of the market of one company. The same is true, by the way, of all the other car companies. They also have something on that order of a quarter of their sales in China. So if that's a problem for Tesla, it's a problem for every car company. I think one has to be careful about not conflating the various companies, because I can only do things that are within the bounds of the law. I cannot do beyond that. My aspiration is to do as much good as possible and to be as productive as possible within the bounds of what is legal. More than that, I cannot do.